The shuttle descended smoothly through the atmosphere, its metallic hull gleaming under Earth's sun. Inside, 3 representatives from the Galactic Federation, Ambassador Nerak, Scientist Lan, and Commander Rivak, watched the human planet come into view. For centuries, the Federation had maintained a distant, almost cautious relationship with humanity. This visit to one of Earth's most renowned military academies was meant to strengthen diplomatic ties, but it also held another purpose: to better understand what made these humans so unique. Ambassador Nerak, a tall figure with smooth gray skin and a high collar of woven fibers, turned to his colleagues. "We must remain open-minded," he said. "Remember, this is their invitation. We are guests here." Commander Rivak, his chitinous armor reflecting a dull green under the cabin lights, folded his arms. "Open-minded or not, we need to be careful. Humans are unpredictable." Scientist Lan, shorter than the others with thin, fine scales covering her slender frame, tapped her data pad. "If we learn from their methods, it could benefit the Federation as a whole. Let's not judge until we see their practices firsthand." As the shuttle approached the Academy's landing pad, the Federation representatives could see the facility's layout from above. Massive training fields stretched in every direction, dotted with cadets running drills. Beyond that, a complex network of buildings stood in orderly rows, their sharp, angular designs a stark contrast to the natural beauty of the surrounding landscape. When the shuttle doors opened, they were met by a group of humans in sharp uniforms. At the center stood General Marcus, a broad-shouldered man with short-cropped hair and a confident stance. "Welcome to Earth's military academy," he said, his voice carrying a calm authority. "We're honored to have you as our guests." The delegation stepped onto the platform, taking in their first impressions. The humans moved with a disciplined precision, their uniforms spotless, their expressions focused. The cadets in the distance were executing intricate marching patterns, their boots striking the ground in unison. Ambassador Nerak extended a hand in the human fashion. General Marcus shook it firmly, then introduced his staff. "This is Colonel James, our head of training operations. And this is Captain Lewis, who will be your guide today." "Thank you, General," said Nerak. "We are eager to learn about your methods and culture." The tour began with the main academy hall. As they walked, Captain Lewis provided a brief history. "Our academy was established over a century ago, after the global conflicts of the 21st century. We learned from our mistakes and developed a new approach to training, one that emphasizes creativity, adaptability, and resilience." The Federation representatives nodded, though they remained skeptical. As they passed through the corridors, they saw cadets engaged in various activities: hand-to-hand combat training, strategic planning sessions, and small group discussions on hypothetical scenarios. When they reached the outdoor training grounds, the delegation paused. Before them was an open field where groups of cadets were conducting a tactical exercise. They moved quickly, setting up barricades, deploying small drones, and using holographic maps to coordinate their maneuvers. "What are they doing now?" asked Lan, her scaled brow furrowing. "This is a live simulation," explained Colonel James. "The cadets are divided into squads. Each squad has a different mission objective. One is tasked with defending a critical point, another with reconnaissance, and another with assaulting an enemy position. They're judged not only on success, but also on how they adapt to changing conditions." Commander Rivak tilted his head, his mandibles twitching in thought. "And how do you measure their effectiveness?" "We assess their ability to think on their feet," said General Marcus. "Victory in battle isn't just about following orders. It's about understanding when to break from the plan, when to improvise, and when to push through adversity." The cadets moved with surprising efficiency, but their tactics appeared unconventional to the Federation observers. One squad seemed to purposely draw enemy attention, allowing another to flank from the sides. Another team used a decoy drone to create confusion, then launched a surprise attack from an unexpected angle. These maneuvers seem chaotic, Lan observed. Is this level of disorder typical? General Marcus smiled slightly. It's not disorder. It's controlled chaos. Our history has taught us that the ability to adapt in unpredictable situations is often what determines success. Our cadets learn early that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Ambassador Narak remained quiet, but his mind was racing. The humans' methods were unlike anything the Federation had developed. Federation forces relied on meticulous planning and precise execution, avoiding unnecessary risk. Yet here, the humans seemed to embrace risk as part of their strategy. As the group continued their tour, they entered the Academy's Hall of Honor. The walls were lined with plaques and holographic displays commemorating past graduates who had made significant contributions to Earth's defense. A large central display featured a recording of a historic battle against a hostile alien force that had threatened Earth a decade earlier. The footage showed human forces fighting with a combination of advanced technology and unconventional tactics, eventually turning the tide against overwhelming odds. You must understand, General Marcus said, addressing the delegation, we do not seek conflict. But when it finds us, we ensure that our people are prepared. Every cadet who trains here learns not just to fight, but to think critically, to adapt, and to protect what matters most. Ambassador Narak met Marcus's gaze. Your methods are unique. I see why your academy is held in such high regard. Thank you, Marcus replied. And this is just the beginning. There's much more to show you. The delegation left the Hall of Honor, their earlier skepticism beginning to shift. They couldn't deny that the humans had something special, something that set them apart from the rest of the galaxy. As the tour continued, the Federation representatives couldn't help but wonder, what would it mean if these methods were applied on a galactic scale? The thought lingered in their minds, casting a subtle shadow over the otherwise polite and professional visit. The Federation delegation walked through the Academy's central courtyard, surrounded by towering stone monuments that bore the names of past graduates. Each monument was etched with a motto, some as simple as resilience and courage, while others were longer phrases that spoke to the lessons learned within these walls. Ambassador Narak slowed his pace to read them, his gray features thoughtful. Victory comes from adaptation, not rigidity, he read aloud. Is this a common belief here? General Marcus, walking at his side, nodded. It's one of our core principles. Adaptation has saved lives more times than I can count. Scientist Land glanced at her data pad, tapping out notes. Your emphasis on flexibility is interesting. Federation training relies on strict protocols and heavily detailed procedures. It minimizes mistakes and ensures predictable outcomes. Marcus chuckled lightly. Predictable outcomes are great, until you meet someone who doesn't play by the rules. That's when adaptability becomes the difference between victory and defeat. Commander Rivak folded his arms as he walked, his rigid posture contrasting with the relaxed strides of their human guides. In the Federation, we rely on discipline and order. We have little tolerance for improvisation. I hope you understand why this concept of yours seems strange to us. Strange, perhaps, Marcus replied, but effective. They turned a corner and entered a long hallway lined with photographs and holographic displays. Each showed groups of cadets at different stages of their training, climbing sheer rock faces, navigating dense forests, operating under simulated zero-gravity conditions. Captain Lewis, who had been quiet until now, stopped and pointed to a series of images on the left wall. These were taken during one of our most famous training scenarios, she explained. Cadets were dropped into an unfamiliar environment with limited supplies and no advanced technology. Their mission was to survive and complete a set of objectives. The point wasn't to see who followed the textbook, but who could think on their feet and come out ahead. Lan raised an eyebrow. Survival exercises without advanced technology? Why remove the very tools that give you an advantage? It's about learning to succeed even if the tools fail, Marcus interjected. If you can think clearly, adapt quickly, and find solutions when everything goes wrong, then you'll thrive when conditions are ideal. Rivak let out a low clicking sound that might have been a laugh. You train your soldiers to expect failure? We train them to expect the unexpected, Marcus corrected. To be ready for any situation, not just the ones they've prepared for. As they walked further, they came upon a large circular room. In the center stood a massive holographic projector displaying a rotating 3D map of a star system. Around it, cadets sat at consoles, reviewing data and discussing possible strategies. Marcus led the group inside and gestured for the delegation to watch. This is our strategy lab, he said. Here, cadets analyze real-world scenarios, both historical and hypothetical. They study what worked, what didn't, and most importantly, why. One of the cadets, a young man with a closely shaved head and sharp eyes, stood and addressed the room. In this scenario, the enemy fleet outnumbers our forces 3-1. Standard doctrine says to fortify and wait for reinforcements. But I propose an alternative approach. He tapped a console, and the holographic display shifted. His plan involved dividing their fleet into smaller groups, luring the enemy into a trap, and striking from multiple angles. The Federation delegates watched in silence as the cadets debated the pros and cons of the idea. What's remarkable isn't just the plan, Marcus explained in a low voice. It's that these cadets feel empowered to challenge conventional thinking. They're encouraged to question the status quo and develop new strategies. That's where real innovation comes from. Nerak considered this. Encouraging dissent can lead to division. How do you ensure cohesion? We teach them that challenging ideas is not the same as undermining authority, Marcus replied. Respect for command is still critical, but questioning methods, when done constructively, makes the entire unit stronger. Lan tilted her head. And this approach is universally successful? You've never had issues with chaos? Marcus shrugged. It's not perfect. Sometimes a cadet will push too far, or a plan will fail. But we learn from those failures. In the end, it's the ability to adapt and innovate that keeps us ahead. Rivak's mandibles clicked again, this time in a thoughtful rhythm. Your species seems to thrive on risk. Not risk for the sake of it, Marcus said, his tone measured. Calculated risks. The kind that offer great rewards if handled wisely. That's what we teach here, how to assess, decide, and execute with precision, even when the situation is volatile. The delegation spent the rest of the day observing various sessions. They watched cadets working on advanced tactical simulations, dissecting past battles, and even engaging in team-building exercises that emphasized trust and communication. The cadets moved quickly and confidently, their interactions seamless and their discussions lively. By the time the group reconvened in a conference room for a late afternoon debriefing, it was clear the Federation representatives had been given much to think about. The humans' approach to military training was unlike anything they had seen before. It was as if the academy thrived on controlled unpredictability, teaching cadets to not only accept chaos but to master it. General Marcus, Nerak said as the meeting concluded, you've given us a great deal to consider. Your methods are unconventional, but I can see their value. Marcus nodded. I'm glad you're starting to understand. We may have different approaches, but ultimately, we all want the same thing, a safer galaxy. Rivak, still stiff and formal, added, whether these methods are truly superior remains to be seen. But I admit, your cadets are impressive. They are, Marcus agreed. And they'll be even more so by the time they graduate. You'll see. As the Federation delegation left the room, their initial skepticism had begun to waver. They hadn't yet seen everything, but the foundation was laid. What they had witnessed so far challenged their assumptions, forcing them to reconsider what they believed to be the best way to prepare for the unknown. The Federation delegates entered the simulation room, their footsteps echoing faintly on the polished floor. The space was immense, far larger than any training facility they had encountered within the Federation. Circular in design, the room's walls were lined with holographic projectors and large screens that displayed live data feeds. In the center of the room stood an elevated platform surrounded by cadets, each seated at a terminal. The air hummed with a mixture of focused concentration and quiet anticipation. "This is one of our most advanced training environments," Captain Lewis explained as she gestured to the surrounding technology. "Here, cadets experience live combat scenarios that replicate real-world conditions. The goal is not only to test their tactical knowledge but also their ability to adapt to rapidly changing situations." Ambassador Nerak stepped closer to one of the consoles, peering at the streams of numbers and moving icons. "And these scenarios, they are entirely simulated?" "Simulated, but realistic," General Marcus said. "Every variable, from the enemy's strategy to the weather conditions, is modeled with extreme precision. The cadets don't just see the simulation, they feel it. It's as close to the real thing as we can make it without anyone getting hurt." Commander Rivak crossed his arms, his gaze scanning the room. "The Federation employs simulations as well, but they are highly controlled. The environment you describe seems chaotic." "That's the point," Marcus replied. "Our goal is to prepare them for the chaos they'll face in the field. Real combat isn't orderly. Plans fall apart, communication breaks down, and enemies don't follow predictable patterns. This room teaches our cadets how to think clearly when everything else is falling apart." Scientist Lan tilted her head, her fingers tapping on her data pad. "I'm curious about the psychological impact of these simulations. How do your cadets handle the stress?" "We monitor them closely," Captain Lewis answered. "Every cadet undergoes regular psychological evaluations. They're trained to manage stress and maintain composure under pressure. It's part of the curriculum." As they spoke, the lights in the room dimmed slightly, and a voice over the intercom announced the start of the next scenario. On the large central display, a new simulation loaded, showing a complex battlefield in orbit around a gas giant. Enemy ships appeared, their formations shifting and converging on the cadets' simulated fleet. The cadets began issuing commands, their movements quick and confident. "These cadets are handling a scenario based on a historical event," Marcus explained. "It was one of the most challenging conflicts Earth faced before joining the galactic community. The enemy was superior in numbers and technology, but we found a way to outmaneuver them." The Federation delegates watched closely as the scenario unfolded. The cadets divided their forces, sending small strike groups to harass the enemy's flanks. They deployed decoys that mimicked the appearance of full-sized ships, confusing the opposing fleet's targeting systems. Meanwhile, the main force executed a bold maneuver, charging straight through a narrow gap in the enemy's line. "Why not simply retreat and wait for reinforcements?" Nerak asked, his voice tinged with concern. "That seems like the logical approach." Marcus shook his head. "Retreating would have allowed the enemy to regroup and fortify their position. By striking decisively, we took the initiative. The cadets learn that sometimes the best defense is a strong offense." Rivak frowned, his mandibles clicking softly. "These tactics are reckless. They rely on the enemy making mistakes." "They rely on making the enemy respond to our moves," Marcus corrected. "When you control the pace of the battle, you gain the advantage. The cadets are taught to take calculated risks, not gamble blindly." As the scenario continued, the cadet strategy began to show results. The enemy fleet faltered, their formation breaking apart under the relentless pressure. One cadet coordinated a daring maneuver, sending a squadron through the gas giant's upper atmosphere to emerge behind the enemy's flagship. The Federation delegates watched in stunned silence as the enemy's forces crumbled under the unexpected attack. The room erupted in applause from the other cadets and instructors as the simulation ended. On the display, the final results showed a decisive victory. The cadets on the platform stood and saluted, their expressions proud but composed. Nerak turned to Marcus. "I'll admit, that was impressive. The speed, the creativity, the ability to adapt to changing circumstances, it's clear why your academy has such a strong reputation." "It's not just about winning," Marcus said. "It's about preparing them for the unknown. The galaxy is vast, and the threats we face aren't always predictable. These cadets learn to expect the unexpected and to think several steps ahead." Lan tapped her data pad again, her expression thoughtful. "There's an element of intuition here that the Federation's training lacks. Our methods rely heavily on logic and pre-planned responses. Perhaps there's value in teaching adaptability at a deeper level." Rivak remained silent, but his body language suggested that he, too, was reconsidering his earlier skepticism. As the delegation left the simulation room, their conversation grew quieter. The experience had left a mark on them, forcing them to question their assumptions about human military training. They had come expecting to see rigid, orderly drills, but instead they found something far more dynamic, something that didn't just teach how to fight, but how to think, innovate, and prevail under any circumstances. The room was spacious yet intimate, designed for sharp minds rather than large crowds. On one wall, a holographic map of a distant star system glimmered, showing the positions of simulated fleets and strategic points. Around a long table sat the Academy's top cadets, their uniforms crisp, their postures straight. At the head of the table stood an instructor, a silver-haired man with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded attention without effort. Across the table, the Galactic Federation delegation observed, silently taking in the scene. "This session," General Marcus explained, "is where cadets learn the art of strategy. They're given scenarios drawn from real historical conflicts, complete with limited information, shifting conditions, and unpredictable adversaries. Their task isn't just to win, it's to understand why certain decisions succeed and others fail." Scientist Lan adjusted her data pad, her large eyes scanning the table's display. "So they learn not only by doing, but by reflecting on their decisions." "Exactly," said Marcus. "Victory is important, but understanding how you achieved it is what makes you truly prepared." The scenario displayed on the holographic map involved a hypothetical conflict in a neutral star system. The cadets were tasked with defending a strategically critical space station from an overwhelmingly larger enemy fleet. The station's destruction would result in the loss of a key supply route, crippling the defenders' ability to maintain a presence in the region. Reinforcements were at least 48 hours away, far too long to hold out without a plan. A young cadet named Reed, seated at the center of the table, stood and addressed the room. His tone was calm but decisive. "We can't outgun them, but we can outthink them. My proposal is to set up a series of decoy distress signals in nearby asteroid belts. This should force their fleet to split up, thinning their numbers and delaying their main force. Meanwhile, we concentrate our defenses around the station's critical points and prepare a counterattack on their supply line. If we cut their supply chain, they'll have to retreat before they can fully deploy." The room buzzed with low murmurs as the other cadets considered his idea. Several raised hands to offer suggestions, while others pointed out potential weaknesses in the plan. Rather than bristle at criticism, Reed nodded and made notes, welcoming the feedback. "This approach seems bold," Ambassador Nerak observed, leaning toward Marcus. "To deliberately lure the enemy into spreading itself thin, what if it backfires?" Marcus smiled faintly. "That's why we teach them to anticipate contingencies. If the decoys fail, they'll have a backup plan. And if that plan falters, they'll adapt again. What you're seeing isn't just a strategy session. It's a mental exercise in resilience and quick thinking." One of the cadets, a woman with a stern expression and a firm voice, stood next. Cadet Reed's plan is a solid foundation, but I recommend adding a layer of misdirection. Along with the decoy signals, we deploy drone ships disguised as cargo freighters. These drones will appear as if they're retreating under fire, leading the enemy deeper into our territory. Once we've lured them into a compromised position, we'll launch a concentrated counteroffensive at their command ship. The instructor nodded approvingly. Good. But consider this, what if the enemy realizes the drones are fakes? How would you adjust? Without hesitation, the cadet responded. If the drones fail, we transition to phase 2. The decoys are a first layer, not the entire plan. While they're distracted by the decoys, we'll use stealth fighters to infiltrate their rear lines, targeting their fuel depots. That way, even if the decoys don't fully deceive them, they'll still be caught off guard. Lan tapped her data pad, speaking aloud. This iterative planning is fascinating. In the Federation, plans are typically locked in well in advance, leaving little room for such on-the-fly adjustments. That's the difference, Marcus said. We prepare them to think dynamically. It's not enough to have a plan A. They need plan B, plan C, and the confidence to create plan D if the situation calls for it. Commander Rivak watched intently, his mandibles clicking softly. This is all theoretical. In a real battle, chaos reigns. Would these cadets truly maintain such composure under fire? You'll see in time, Marcus replied, his voice calm. For now, keep observing. The strategy session continued, with cadets stepping forward to present their own variations on the central plan. Some focused on defensive maneuvers, building layers of shielding and overlapping fields of fire. Others proposed aggressive strikes, targeting the enemy's strongest ships to shatter their morale. Each suggestion was met with critical questions from their peers and the instructor, fostering a healthy environment of debate and refinement. Nerak folded his hands on the table. General Marcus, I see the value in this approach, but I must ask, do you ever worry that such independence might undermine the chain of command? Marcus shook his head. On the contrary, it strengthens it. When cadets graduate from this program, they don't just follow orders, they understand them. They know why a commander makes a certain call and can carry out that order with precision because they've been trained to think critically. When the unexpected happens, they can act without hesitation, always keeping the mission success in mind. The session concluded with the cadets summarizing their collective strategy. The final plan incorporated elements from each proposal, resulting in a multi-layered approach that accounted for deception, flexibility, and precise timing. The instructor praised their teamwork and reminded them that the most successful strategies are born from collaboration and continuous learning. As the cadets filed out of the room, the Federation delegation remained seated, exchanging quiet glances. They had witnessed something profoundly different from their own structured training methods. The human cadets' ability to question, adapt, and refine their strategies in real time was a concept that, while unfamiliar, held undeniable promise. We have much to think about, Nerak said finally, his voice thoughtful. Yes, Rivak agreed, his tone uncharacteristically soft. This is not what I expected, but I see the potential. Lan glanced at her data pad, still typing notes. If nothing else, this approach encourages innovation. The Federation might benefit from considering a more flexible model, at least in certain scenarios. Marcus, standing nearby, overheard their conversation and smiled faintly. I'm glad you're beginning to see the value in what we do. These cadets have learned to think on their feet and work together, even under pressure. That's what will keep them, and us, prepared for whatever challenges lie ahead. As the delegation stood to leave, the sense of skepticism that had lingered in the room was replaced by a quiet, growing respect. They had entered the academy expecting to see a rigid, militaristic system, but what they had found instead was something far more dynamic, a training program that valued not just discipline, but creativity, adaptability, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. The Federation delegation sat in the Academy's Grand Hall, a spacious chamber lined with banners and insignias from Earth's military history. This part of the visit was less about combat and strategy, and more about understanding the culture behind humanity's fighting force. The walls displayed holographic projections of Earth's historical events, some showcasing ancient battles, others celebrating moments of peace. At the front of the room stood a group of cadets, preparing to give a presentation. This session, General Marcus explained, is about more than tactics. We want our cadets to understand why they fight, not just how. We teach them that every decision in battle has consequences. The better they understand their own history and values, the more thoughtful and responsible they'll be as leaders. Ambassador Narak nodded, though his expression was thoughtful. This is not something we emphasize within the Federation. Our training focuses on discipline and results, not cultural understanding. Scientist Lan tapped her data pad. It's an interesting approach. By grounding your cadets in history, you're giving them context for their decisions. That context might lead to more measured actions in the field. At that moment, one of the cadets stepped forward. He was a tall young man, his voice steady and clear. Today, we'll be sharing examples of how Earth's culture and history shape the way we think about conflict and cooperation. He gestured to the first holographic display, which showed the image of a vast naval fleet on a blue ocean. This is a depiction of a conflict from Earth's early 20th century. It was a time when many nations competed for resources and power. The lessons we learn from this period aren't just about strategy. They're about the cost of war, the importance of diplomacy, and the need to prevent future conflicts. Another cadet took over, pointing to a different projection. This one showed a rugged mountain pass with soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. In this example, a small force held off a much larger invading army by using their knowledge of the terrain and their unity as a team. This taught us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, resourcefulness and determination can make the difference. As each cadet presented, they wove stories of resilience, creativity, and cooperation. They talked about how humans had learned from their past mistakes, how they had struggled to find balance between competition and collaboration. They also shared examples of Earth's art, literature, and music that reflected themes of perseverance and hope. The Federation delegation listened intently. Ambassador Narak occasionally glanced at Marcus, as if gauging the general's reaction. Lan continued to take notes, her focus unwavering. Even Commander Rivak, typically stoic, seemed to lean forward slightly, his antennae twitching. When one cadet spoke about a famous piece of literature, a tale of individuals from vastly different backgrounds coming together to achieve a common goal, Narak raised a hand. What is the purpose of sharing this story? How does it connect to your training? The cadet met his gaze confidently. This story reminds us that success often comes from understanding and valuing differences. In the Academy, we work with people from all over Earth, each bringing unique perspectives and strengths. When we face challenges, it's that diversity of thought and experience that helps us overcome obstacles. Lan tapped her pad again, murmuring to herself. Interesting. By fostering an appreciation for cultural diversity, you're effectively teaching your cadets to approach problems from multiple angles. As the presentations continued, the cadets showed how Earth's cultural achievements, its art, history, and even its past mistakes, contributed to the training methods used at the Academy. They explained how these lessons shaped not just their approach to conflict, but also their understanding of responsibility and leadership. The session concluded with a short performance. A group of cadets played an old Earth tune on a mix of traditional and modern instruments, the melody both haunting and uplifting. The notes seemed to linger in the air, carrying with them a sense of resilience and hope. For a moment, the room was silent, the music having struck a chord with everyone present. After the performance, General Marcus addressed the Federation delegates. What you've just seen is as important to us as any combat simulation. Our culture, our history, our values, they are the foundation of everything we do. By understanding where we've been, we gain clarity about where we're going. Narak rose from his seat, his expression thoughtful. General, I can see that this approach offers a perspective we had not considered. By grounding your cadets in their cultural heritage, you're instilling in them a sense of purpose beyond mere victory. This is a fascinating model. Lan added, I'm particularly intrigued by how you integrate creativity and critical thinking. The Federation's methods are more standardized. Perhaps we could benefit from introducing similar cultural reflections into our own training programs. Rivak, still silent, gave a single nod. Though he said nothing, it was clear the experience had left an impression. As the delegation left the hall, they couldn't help but discuss what they had witnessed. The cultural exchange had given them a glimpse into a side of humanity they hadn't fully understood. The cadets weren't just warriors in training, they were individuals who valued their history and culture, who learned from their past and used those lessons to build a stronger, more thoughtful future. For the Federation representatives, this was a revelation. It wasn't just humanity's strategic adaptability that set them apart. It was the way they combined intellect, culture, and history to forge a unique approach to leadership and conflict resolution. This realization, more than anything else, would stay with them long after their visit to the Academy was over. The end of the visit arrived quicker than the Galactic Federation delegation had expected. Standing on the Academy's main observation platform, Ambassador Narak, Scientist Lan, and Commander Rivak gazed out over the training grounds one last time. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows over the fields where cadets still moved with precision, their voices calling commands, their energy undiminished even after a long day. General Marcus approached, his steps purposeful yet unhurried. I trust you've seen what you came to see, he said, his voice carrying the faintest hint of a smile. Narak turned, his expression thoughtful. We have seen much, General. Far more than we anticipated. Behind him, Lan's data pad flickered as she made a final note. Your methods, your philosophies, they are unlike anything we've encountered before. The emphasis on adaptability, cultural grounding, and strategic independence is compelling. There is much we must consider. Rivak's mandibles clicked softly. I came here expecting to find disarray beneath the surface of your discipline. Instead, I find a structured chaos, one that somehow strengthens rather than weakens. It's a strange balance, but I cannot deny its results. Marcus nodded. It's not a system for everyone. It demands trust, flexibility, and a willingness to challenge the conventional. But it works for us. As they spoke, a small group of cadets passed by on their way to an evening drill. They saluted as they walked by, their eyes forward, their movements sharp and purposeful. Narak watched them go, his thoughts visibly distant. The question, General, is what comes next, Narak said after a moment. This visit was not only a gesture of goodwill, but also a way for us to understand the role humanity might play in the galaxy's future. And now, having seen your academy, I must admit, I am both hopeful and uneasy. That's understandable, Marcus said. We are new to the galactic stage. Our methods, our culture, it's a lot to take in. But I believe that our unique perspective can bring something valuable to the Federation. It's not about replacing what you have, it's about complementing it. Lan nodded, her fingers pausing on her data pad. There's an opportunity here. The Federation has always valued stability and predictability, but your approach introduces a dynamic element we've been lacking. You show us that sometimes, the best way forward is to embrace uncertainty. Rivak, who had been quiet for much of the conversation, finally spoke. Uncertainty is not a virtue. It is a danger. Only if you fear it, Marcus replied. Our training teaches that uncertainty is inevitable. How you respond to it determines whether it becomes a weakness or a strength. Revok's mandibles clicked again, a slower, more deliberate rhythm. Perhaps there is wisdom in that. But it is a difficult concept for the Federation to accept. That's why we don't expect you to adopt it overnight, Marcus said. We only hope you'll keep an open mind. Nerak turned back to the training grounds, the sun now dipping below the horizon, its last rays casting a warm glow over the academy. We will report what we've seen here. Your methods, your philosophy, your cadets' resilience, all of it. The Federation Council will need time to digest this. But I believe they will see the potential. I certainly do. The ambassador extended his hand. Marcus took it, a firm, respectful handshake. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity, General. Whatever the future holds, I believe today has brought us one step closer to understanding each other. It's been an honor, Marcus replied. And if you ever wish to return, our doors are always open. As the delegation walked back to their shuttle, the cadets lined the main path, saluting the visitors in a show of respect. It was a quiet but powerful gesture, one that left the Federation representatives with a deep sense of the Academy's spirit. Once inside the shuttle, the delegation settled into their seats, the engines humming softly beneath them. As Earth's surface grew smaller through the viewport, Land finally spoke. This will not be easy to explain to the Council. No, it won't, Nerak agreed. But they must understand that humanity's potential goes beyond raw power or advanced technology. It lies in the way they think, the way they adapt. If we ignore that, we do so at our own peril. Revok folded his arms, his gaze steady. And if the Council sees them as a threat? Then we will remind them that every great alliance begins with trust, Nerak said. We must show the Council what we saw today, a species willing to challenge itself, to learn from its past, and to find strength in diversity. That is something we can benefit from, not fear. As the shuttle climbed higher, Earth faded into a blue marble below, and the stars stretched out before them. The Galactic Federation delegation carried more than just notes and observations. They carried the beginnings of a new understanding, one that might shape the future of their galaxy.